In 1962, the United States came closer to nuclear war than most Americans realized. One wrong decision, one wrong order, and millions of lives could have been lost. But how did America reach this dangerous moment? To understand that, we have to go back to 1945. World War II had just ended. The United States and the Soviet Union had fought on the same side against Nazi Germany. But after the war ended, their friendship quickly disappeared. Instead, two powerful superpowers began competing for global influence. The United States supported democracy and capitalism. The Soviet Union supported communism, and both sides believed their system was the future of the world. Soon, Europe began to divide. Western European countries moved closer to America. Many Eastern European countries came under Soviet influence. A new conflict was beginning. But it was not a normal war. It was a war of fear, politics, technology, and military power. Then came the most dangerous weapon of all, nuclear weapons. In 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world saw what nuclear weapons could do. Then, in 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its own atomic bomb. Now both superpowers had nuclear weapons, and the competition became even more dangerous. America built more powerful bombs. The Soviet Union did the same. Both sides developed long-range missiles. Both built military bases, and both used spies to steal military secrets. This became known as the nuclear arms race. In 1949, the United States and its allies created NATO. Then, in 1955, the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact. Europe was now divided between two powerful military alliances. But there was one reason America and the Soviet Union avoided direct war. Both sides knew that a nuclear conflict could destroy them both. So instead of fighting each other directly, they competed through other countries. In 1950, the Korean War began. Later, Vietnam became another major battlefield of the Cold War. At the same time, the CIA and the Soviet KGB fought a secret war. Spies searched for information. Governments tried to discover military plans, and propaganda was used to influence millions of people. But then came 1962. The Soviet Union began placing nuclear missiles in Cuba. Cuba was only about 90 miles from the coast of Florida. For the United States, this was a nightmare. Soviet nuclear weapons were suddenly sitting dangerously close to American territory. President John F. Kennedy had to make an impossible decision. Should America attack? Should the missiles be removed by force? Or should the United States wait? Every choice carried enormous risks, because one wrong decision, one wrong order, and millions of lives could have been lost. And that is exactly where the world was heading. The Cuban Missile Crisis had begun, and the next 13 days would become some of the most dangerous days in human history. In October 1962, the United States faced one of the most dangerous moments in its history. American aircraft photographed Soviet missile sites in Cuba. The photographs were shown to President John F. Kennedy. The situation was clear. The Soviet Union was placing nuclear missiles only about 90 miles from the United States. Kennedy now had a terrible choice. If America attacked the missile sites, the Soviet Union could retaliate, and that could lead to nuclear war. But doing nothing would leave Soviet missiles dangerously close to American cities. So Kennedy chose another option, a naval blockade. American ships surrounded Cuba and stopped additional Soviet military supplies from reaching the island. For 13 days, the world waited. American forces were placed on high alert. Soviet forces remained in Cuba, and Washington and Moscow exchanged urgent messages.
Most ordinary people had no idea how close the world was to disaster. Then, finally, an agreement was reached. Soviet leader Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States secretly agreed to remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended, and the world stepped back from nuclear war. But the Cold War continued. The competition soon moved into space. In 1957, Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. America was shocked. The United States feared that Soviet space technology could also mean stronger missile technology. So the space race began. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. America responded with an even bigger goal, the Moon. In 1969, American astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the lunar surface. For the United States, it was more than a scientific achievement. It was a powerful symbol of American technology. But while the two superpowers competed, the Soviet Union was slowly developing serious economic problems. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became Soviet leader. He introduced major reforms and tried to change the Soviet system. Across Eastern Europe, communist governments began losing their power. Then came 1989. The Berlin Wall fell. For decades, the wall had symbolized the division between East and West. Its collapse showed that the Cold War was coming to an end. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union itself collapsed. After nearly half a century, the Cold War was over. But its legacy remained. Nuclear weapons still existed. Military alliances still shaped global politics, and the fear of nuclear conflict never completely disappeared. The Cold War taught the world a terrifying lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous war is the war that never begins. For decades, America and the Soviet Union stood against each other. They built weapons, they competed in space, they used spies, they supported wars around the world, and several times they came dangerously close to nuclear conflict. But the final missile was never launched. The Cold War ended without becoming the nuclear war the world feared. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.